says otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think I'll need that? We good to go then? Oh, still stragglers. We're being forced in by gunpoint at this time. 4:30 on a Saturday. Sure there's other things we could be doing. Any more for any more? Well, yeah. Standing room only. Yeah. If somebody would be grateful enough to take a picture of me at some point while I'm presenting so I can get it on Twitter, that'd be good. Ideally my good side, which is probably my back. Right, okay, let's crack on then. Oh, just in case, this is about troubleshooting Windows problems with PowerShell, not troubleshooting PowerShell. Yeah? Oh, well, no one's fled, so that's good. So me, yeah, I know I don't look old enough, but I've been programming since 1980, which is 10 years after Richard started. He was telling us this morning. But started life as a Unix device driver developer before going into the dark side of Windows via Citrix in 1995. So I've been doing a lot of end-user computer UC stuff since then, troubleshooting slow logons, application problems, those sorts of things, as well as back-end server problem as well. Because one thing you find as an EUC consultant is you're supposed to know everything in the stack, including back-end servers, networks, and everything else. The cards at the front if anybody's interested, because I'll be referring to various of my troubleshooting scripts on GitHub. So hopefully we're all converts, so I can go through this pretty quickly, why I'd use PowerShell for troubleshooting as opposed to DevOps or automation or the other interesting things hopefully you've heard today. First of all, in fact this one was already in, even though I mentioned it to Richard this morning about things like Control R. Yeah, once we can run this stuff interactively, remember it's not just a scripting language. VBS, yeah, great, but you can't use it interactively, can you? You need to write a script. We're using this as a shell, like when I started writing Bourne shell and Corn shell scripts in the 80s when you were how old? Yeah, not born. Yeah, great. Yeah, make me feel old. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. But remember, we do have a persistent command line history, and I'll show you that when I'm demonstrating. So rather than copying and paste from PowerShell ISE, yes, I still use PowerShell ISE, not VS Code. Boom. Why? Because I do a lot of scripting on customer systems. So I have to use lowest common denominator, PowerShell ISE. I just hope usually it's not version 2, because that's painful. And the flip side of that, I didn't realise these fonts were going to be so small, I do apologise, is that if you're doing stuff on a customer system, me as a consultant, and I do something perhaps I don't want the customer to be able to know about, fixing some software maybe that they shouldn't know is broken in the first place, the flip side of this persistent profile business is that, yeah, you leave the evidence there. It's not just, oh, I'm going to exit this PowerShell session, therefore it's all clean, it's all gone away. No, if you've got a persistent Windows profile, you're going to have that history for several thousand lines of things you enter. So remember to edit or remove that as well if you need to cover your tracks. Not that I'm saying I've ever needed to cover my tracks for format C: or anything like that at all. Plenty of stuff out there to help you. You have my GitHub repository, for instance, a load of stuff for Citrix, Microsoft, IIS, SQL. But look at it before you run it as a domain admin on your domain with thousands of users, just to make sure it's not going to do some damage, either accidentally or deliberately. I love PowerShell because I'm inherently a lazy person, so I can tab complete everything, tab complete commands, the arguments, yeah, the whole lot. We've already, well, depending on which sessions you're in, get helps can be very useful, although as a script writer, it's always the pain that I leave to the end to write the help to help people, and also to remind me when I come back in 2 months and don't even recognize the script, what it's actually about. And then things like get member to interrogate it, get command to see what commands there are there in the first place, of which there are, I think last time I counted on my laptop, or I use measure object to count them on my laptop, about just short of 6,000. But what they all do, well, have I got some networking ones? Yeah, I just do a get command star network star. Yeah, but remember, get command, or be aware, the get command can also be used for finding Windows commands. Yeah, it's not just PowerShell commandlets. It's X's, it's MSCs, anything executable. Get command or GCM, the alias, will find for you as well. Then I work with a lot of third-party modules. Obviously, there's Azure ones, so I guess a lot of you doing cloud stuff. But VMware and Citrix produce them as well. Not just really for the automation side, I say, but more for getting health information. So a lot of the troubleshooting I do is trying to be proactive. Let's get a whole load of information up front, so at 7:30 every morning, we can check stuff without having to manually go on and say, well, is that working? Is that running? Is that okay? And get an email or set alerts up if you don't have monitoring software in there like SCOM or ControlUp. And once you know how to use one lot of commandlets, rinse and repeat. Yeah, selects, sorts, format tables, all that sort of stuff. One lot of commandlets, just reuse it. Alias is great when you're typing in the shell interactively. Don't use them in scripts though, because it makes it much harder to understand what's going on. So hopefully the script samples you've seen today, like Richard's again this morning, there's not an alias in sight, because it makes it much more difficult to understand those things. People, particularly those people who are not necessarily that au fait with PowerShell, you hand them a script and there's percents and question marks and GCMs and GCIs and PSs, and it's like, well, what's all this perverse stuff? Yeah, use full names. After all, with tab completion, it's not exactly difficult, is it, guys? And the same for parameters as well. We have tab complete, so the parameter names are in there. Don't rely on positional parameters. And then just dead easy to get data out, particularly in CSV. Somebody wants a report or something, don't even need to go to SQL reporting services. Because PowerShell sits on top of .NET, we've got SQL built in, so we don't even need to use the SQL PS module that you sometimes need to install on SQL servers. We just use built-in .NET stuff, get all our results, bang, straight into a CSV, send it to someone, and everybody's got Excel, haven't they? Particularly the people who want to actually look at reports and things like that. And then good old other formats like XML and JSON. There will be a lot of demos, by the way. It always happens on this slide. Why can I not do page down? So I might be okay with PowerShell, but for some reason I always get stuck on this slide. It must be a good technical reason, but I'm buggered if I know what it is. You see, even next doesn't work. So what sort of issues are we talking about? Well, a lot of process issues, yeah? So rather than me having to go and look at Task Manager or get Sysinternal's Process Explorer, people familiar with? Actually, quite often a go-to tool. A lot of the stuff that I used to use that for, I can now do in PowerShell. So I can look at, what are the loaded modules for this process? Typical thing I spend half my life doing, it seems, is playing Spot the Difference, that fun game from childhood, which is, this system or this user works, this one doesn't. What the hell's the difference? Which is something I'm trying to automate, but it's difficult. So it's, what's the difference in, if this process works over here and doesn't, so Word over here works, Word over here doesn't. Okay, when it's loaded, let me have a look at make sure all the loaded modules, all the DLLs are the same versions. Or there's, oh, hold on, this one that crashes has got this extra DLL in. Oh, that's from vendor XYZ. Where's that from? Oh, and look, it's dated 7 years ago. Yes, okay, suspicions, yeah. We can get all that stuff very easily, as I'll show you with PowerShell. So there's a lot of stuff we can do with process, particularly process start times, again, is something I look at a lot of. Someone says, oh, they've got a problem with this service. You look at the start time of it, which again, sort of thing you used to use Process Explorer for. Now just quick one line of PowerShell, when did it start? Oh, okay, why did that start, that automatic start service start 4 hours after the OS booted? Again, finding the OS boot time, easy. One line of PowerShell through WMI or KIM, as I'm going to call it. We'll have an argument later. It's the GIF versus GIF. Yeah. Hands up for GIF. Hands up for GIF. Ooh, you nearly put a hand up there. I was going to have to ask you to leave. Oh, I'm getting the look now. Oh, what? Yeah. Anyway, again, services, a lot we can do with services, checking they're running, restarting them, checking attributes, comparing permissions. Yeah, because we don't let our users run as local admins, do we? And we, even as developers, not people, we don't log on to our desktops as admins. Tell me you don't log on as admins. I'm not logged on as an admin. Again, it just reduces the attack surface. Yeah, I've got an admin, as you'll see, I've got admin PowerShell prompts, but I'm not running my browsers, I'm not running my email as an admin. So a typical thing in the Citrix world is we say, well, does this work okay as an admin? Yes, it does. No, it doesn't work as a normal user. It's a permissions problem somewhere. Where? Well, that's where the fun can get. Sysinternal's process monitor sometimes. Again, I've looked at, I have in fact automated some process monitor troubleshooting for a company called Controller. So you can basically say, oh, process monitor, it's all a bit tricky. Basically, point it at the server, reproduce your problem, and it'll come back and show you what's going on. So we can compare and we can fix permissions very easily as well. Of course, networks, it's always the network, isn't it? It's always DNS. Yeah, and we can do a lot of the testing there as well. But just a little bit more involved than ping. Yeah, ping's not a great test, particularly if you've got Windows firewall on internally, which you should have really for security, because it's probably, by default it's not set to reply to ICMP anyway. Actually, what I want to do is I want to check that port on that machine is alive. Yeah, with the sort of thing I'd normally install Telnet for in the old days. As I think I put out on Twitter last week, you can always tell a good admin he's the one who actually has bothered to install Telnet. Yeah. Whereas now we can use test-net connection to test that a particular port on a particular machine is alive. Certificates. Yeah. So let's actually go over to a PowerShell prompt. Which one should we have? Let's have a non-privileged one. I don't know how good my font. Yeah, that font size looks okay. Just smile for the photo and make sure my chins are pulled in. What we have here is the ability, so we can do things like DIR. Yeah, we know that from our CMD days. I did notice you had a CMD pinned to your taskbar at the bottom. I think we'll end up fighting afterwards anyway. So I can do a DIR. Actually, DIR is just an alias for getChildItem. And here I've got a file system. Yeah, so it's just like a CMD. But what I can do is look at what other PowerShell drives I have. So I've got my C and my D. Notice I've got registry providers as well. So I can start to interrogate the registry without having to go to regedit or reg.exe or anything like that. Similarly for certificates, there's a certificate PS provider. So I can do things like cert, again, tab complete. My personal certificates, all those on the machine. We'll go for root certificates. By default, just brings up the thumbprint and subject, but I can very quickly put together a one-liner which will say, go and show me all those which expire within the next 60 days. And again, if you've been to the remoting session or heard some of the other ones, very easy to remote that across a large number of machines. Let me go and look at everything, poke it into the AD commandlets or use ADSI, and then let me go and look at every server, every machine on my domain if I want to. Go and show me all the certificates that expire in the next 30 days. So I can get those certificates updated before they actually expire and cause connectivity issues. Registry, again, do a lot of it here. Again, the HK local machine, but guess what? I'm tab completing again. Very easy to get stuff. Count registry keys, check things, set things, delete things, all through those PS providers, where certificates is just one of many. Registry, of course, everything boils down at the end of the day probably to a registry value difference, not necessarily a registry key. That's one of my pet hates. People who confuse keys and values. You don't confuse files and folders, so why would you confuse keys and values? But so again, I'm working on a Mammoth script at the moment to just basically say what's the difference between these two registry keys and all the way down, and actually then produce a reg file that you can import on to the other one to fix it. That's been quite a bit of work. SQL, again, I've already mentioned. There's the SQL PS module, which is probably easier to use, but there's built-in SQL client into .NET. And once you've got some queries, as we all do probably with our scripts, is we just copy and paste the last one and change what we need. So we can do a lot of stuff there, whether it's SQL reporting. So some of the software I put in software, for instance, from Ivanti for various customers. They want reporting. Have they got SQL reporting services? Probably not. So I just give them a quick script which once a week will export a CSV of various bits of data from that database and email it automatically to the people who are excited to read about that sort of stuff. Very easy to do. Again, emailing is built into PowerShell. The CSV production is built into PowerShell. The SQL stuff, even if you think, well, I can't really do the SQL queries. Yeah, you just do what we all do, which is go out onto your favorite search engine, which hopefully isn't Bing, find the query you need, adapt it for your needs, and then pretty much you can copy and paste that into PowerShell as a here string. A lot of AD stuff, particularly if you're doing bulk stuff in AD, either bulk changes, you know, oh, we need to change this particular attribute, or we need to change home drives over, or if you just want to check a large number of accounts or groups, memberships, expiry, last logons, all that sort of stuff. Dead easy with the PowerShell module, which again, you can install anywhere you want. So typically when I'm installing a sort of end user compute system for a customer, I'll just put in a management server which has got all the management consoles on and all the PowerShell modules I need, and then I can run all my scheduled tasks from there as well, or scheduled tasks for the Northerners in the room, and pretty much everything else. As we'll see, even if it's not built into PowerShell, either it could be a third-party library, or we could be able to do it through Kim. I can feel those eyes digging into me. So by default, say on my laptop, we've got well over 800 classes I can query. Not everything's particularly interesting. There's a lot of stuff which is, and we'll come on to some of those. Again, oh, guess what? Tab completion of them. I don't even need to know what they are. Or I can just put patterns in. Oh, I don't quite know what the process one is. All right, I'll do a get Kim instance minus class name star process star, just to get back all the processes. I do this a lot when I'm doing health checks. If I do a health check of a customer system, there might be these 6 servers I'm interested in. I'll go and gather the data on site, and I'll go away and do the documentation, and I'll think, I forgot to get that bit of information. Well, again, got scripts which will go out and query pretty much every Kim class there is, and just write it to a CSV. So I've actually got that raw information there if I need it. It's also good to get from just a ops point of view. So let's take a snapshot of the information at that point, not necessarily a VM snapshot of disks, but I'm going to take a snapshot of the configuration at that point, if I'm not using any sort of configuration management, and then I'm going to do it later on. And that's much easier to play spot the difference, because that's just Excel spreadsheets at the end of the day. It's not necessarily just a passive way of getting information. Some of these Kim classes have methods you can call. So one I use a lot is I want to find out who's taking up all the space on a particular infrastructure server. Someone's logged on and decided to download a 5 gig ISO of something because they needed it, but then forgot to delete it. And now this production server is about to run out of disk space. So again, very easy. And as we'll see, we can remote these. So I'll just go out and say, okay, just give me all the profiles, show me everything over this size, or show me modified in the last X or not modified in the last X days. Oh yeah, that's Bob and he's got 2 gig, but Bob left 12 months ago. Why haven't we cleared up his profile? So it's very easy to go and find that stuff and then just delete the profile using that method, so you don't have to worry about where that profile is. Well, is it in users Bob, or is it actually users Bob 001 because there was a stuck profile before, and all these things which you need to take into account when you're writing delete scripts. Because writing delete scripts, we have to be a little bit careful. Well, we should be a little bit careful. If you're not, just want to mention now again, getting any sort of information with PowerShell, the more you filter out stuff on the left. So if I'm going to I want to pick particularly 100 users out of AD, then I'll use a filter in the initial AD query. What I won't do is get my 10,000 users back and then do a filter. Yeah, because I've got to get those 10,000 items, which if nothing else is going to be perhaps slower, perhaps take more memory. And it's very easy to remote this stuff. So I can give just a comma-separated list, as in an array of machines, and go, well, do it on that machine, and that machine. So I can go and get information. I was saying before when I do these health checks, those 6 infrastructure servers that I need to check, let me go and get all that same information from these 6 machines and put them into that one CSV. So it's then very easy for me to look and compare and contrast if I need to. And of course, with these CSVs, I can load them back into PowerShell later if I need to, and then write some other scripts or use other scripts to munge the data rather than having to do it manually. Again, simply because I'm lazy. And there are other namespaces out there. So people using SCCM? lucky people. I haven't used it for over a year. Yeah, I'm free of SCCM.
2007.
There's some new meaning of the word fun I was previously unaware of, perhaps. Yeah, so rather than just a default namespace, there are other namespaces where people can add in. So on my laptop, I've got an Intel one because of the various Intel bits of hardware. There's a Microsoft one. I've been doing some work with battery recently because I bought one of these things, an external battery for my laptop, but because the laptop still thinks it's on external power, so it hasn't switched into battery saving mode. So I thought, okay, how can I query the various things? So I'm looking around a lot of these WMI KIM classes to figure out how can I get information to allow me to automate the switching between sort of power save and non-power save. So you can just have an explore. So that line there will just show you all the namespaces you've got. And you go and have a little dabble. Because again, there's get KIM class. So I can see what are all the classes. Oh, if you're like me and rather sad, you're looking at it and go, oh, that looks interesting. Let me go and query that and see if anything useful comes back, and then I can write a script. Because the way I write scripts is either I've got a problem to solve, or, oh, this looks interesting, what can I do with it? And be careful, particularly if you're storing stuff yourselves in KIM, that it can bloat the repository. Certainly on sort of end user compute, Citrix servers, RDS servers, that can cause slowness. So what are some of the classes that I tend to use? Well, things like Win32 process. Why is that useful? Well, because you've got get process. Well, it will get things that get process won't, or PS is its alias. Why PS? Because that's how we get process lists on Linux and Unix. So I can get the parent process. So quite often I'll have a script that I'll use in different ways depending on how it's called. So it might be called by different executables. So I can go, who am I being called by? I'm being called by logoff.exe. Therefore I'm going to do something different rather than me being called by logon.exe. So you can look at the parent process. Getting the owners slightly more involved. Put a lot of this stuff up really for reference purposes. So when I make the slide deck available, you've got it there. And one thing I would say is somebody who's been troubleshooting Citrix software for nearly 25 years, if you're writing this sort of stuff, make sure you're only operating on the session you think you're operating on. So if you're writing a script to go and kill off somebody's winword.exe process because you've detected that it's taking far too much CPU, make sure you filter at least on the session ID rather than killing every winword.exe process there is on that box for those 49 other purely innocent users. Yeah, I see that a lot with software that claims to be Citrix and RDS compatible, and it isn't. It was a classic one the other week where, it runs up. Any other user tries to run the software, doesn't run. It doesn't give you an error saying it's already running. No, you have to guess with things like Process Monitor. It's like, and they claim Citrix compatibility. This is one of my favourite. Last boot up time. So when did the machine last boot? Let's get rid of that. So again, I can do a get KIM. It's terrible, this keyboard. Or is it me? So again, tab completing stuff. Win32 operating system. Select. Again, it's an alias for select object. Something boot, can't remember. Well, I can actually, but I'm pretending I don't. It's actually last boot up time. Yeah, but I couldn't remember. It's just something to do with boot, yeah? So last boot was 8:06, 3 days ago. If you actually know the first few letters of it, again, oh look, we can tab complete, yeah? So that could be quite useful, particularly if you're sort of comparing the start time of processes. So if I want to say, well, when did my print spooler process start? Again, I'll do a get dash process, or I could do a PS minus name. Oh look, tab completing process names, yeah? I can't remember quite what it's called. Well, I can again, but... so there's start time. Now, why can't I get start time? Anybody want to guess why I can't get start time? Sorry? No, it is running, because otherwise it wouldn't tab complete it. That's because, being the sensible person I am, I'm not actually an admin in this session. The quickest way to tell if I'm admin is actually to run the filter driver manager control program, because as a non-admin, you'll get an error. So if I switch to an admin prompt where filter manager control program, will bring back results. It's also sometimes useful if you're looking to see if AV drivers and other things are loaded, because it gives you a list of loaded file system filter drivers. Then what I should be able to do is do the same. So I'll use the alias this time to save typing, being the lazy person I am, tab complete, select, start, time. Again, tab completing, bang. Because as a normal user, I couldn't get access to that particular process. So I can see that process started 8:06, and I booted at 8:06. So yeah, it looks like that was the instance that started with the operating system. Whereas if I look at the spooler and it started at 12 o'clock the same day, it's like, oh, why is that? Has it crashed? Going back, look through the event logs, and we'll come back to trawling through event logs very shortly. Quite often I need to get very precise logon times. You say, well, just use the query user command, or Q user for short. Yeah. It's great, isn't it? I logged on at 8:06 and something. So trying to cross-reference that precisely to event logs isn't any use, because was that 8:06:00 or 8:06:15 or 8:06:59? Makes a bit of a difference when I cross-reference stuff. So again, by cross-referencing those two CLIM classes, I can find out the exact times, about 6 places of milliseconds. Computer system give a rich set of information about the computer itself, that and operating system, very useful sort of inventory stuff. Win32 service I use quite a bit, because the built-in get dash service doesn't give you the path to the executable. Sometimes you'll need. But with a lot of these things, you can say, okay, well, let me get a service, let me get all the services which are set to auto start but aren't running, and then start them. Yeah, one line of PowerShell. Although with that, you need to be a little bit careful, because not all auto start processes, services should actually be running. Some will stop if they haven't got any work to do. Not quite sure why that's in a different font size. But that's actually possibly one of the more important points on this slide. Don't use Win32 product. So Win32 product is a CLIM class which will show you all the installed products, so like add remove programs. So again, if I'm comparing that system which works and that one that doesn't, well, what's the difference in installed programs? Natural thing would be to get CLIM instance of Win32 product. But in fact, the link in there will take you to a script that does it via the registry, because Microsoft themselves put out a KB article saying, yeah, don't do it because it's not actually passive. If you do a get CLIM instance of Win32 product, you'll see in your, I can't remember if it's application or system, but one of those two event logs, you'll see a huge number of product XYZ was reconfigured. Like, what? Hold on. I was just doing a get. I was just interrogating to see what was there, and it's saying it's reconfigured, which is not a good thing, really, particularly on production servers under strict change control. What has changed? So there is a rich set of information in event logs. Yeah, event viewer is not necessarily the greatest tool to look at it. You're saying, well, I've looked in the application event log, I've looked in the system event log, can't find anything, therefore I'm going to give up. No, how many event logs are there on there? On a typical Windows system now, enabled, well over 300. So you just go to event viewer and go through all of those. You know, so if I'm diagnosing a logon problem or a user problem, I say, well, about 10 o'clock I tried doing something against this server and it failed. So I'll just manually trawl through those 300 event logs in Event Viewer. Yeah, right, if that's your sort of thing, don't let me stop you. So this is where our friend get one event comes in. As we'll see, first of all, what we can do is actually show all the logs that are available, because there's a lot of logs that you're not even probably aware of, and a bit like I was saying earlier, using things like get command to look and, oh, that looks interesting. Again, I'm always on the lookout for stuff that will give me more telemetry for logon. There are shell operational logs, or group policy logs, or user profile logs, security logs. There's even things like the print operational log will tell me about mapping of printers and things like that. So it's a huge load of stuff. And whilst I keep coming back to these sort of Citrixy logon type examples, it's the same for any sort of troubleshooting. You absolutely think, well, I don't do end user compute. I'm just a user. I don't have to troubleshoot that stuff. But if you're troubleshooting server problems, it's the same thing. Yeah, there's a lot of things to look for. Again, I was saying before, filter left for speed. Outgrid view. How many people know about outgrid view? Yeah, I love outgrid view, as do a lot of people. Although we haven't got it in PowerShell 7, have we? Coming. That'd be good.
Yeah, it's features last month or so.
I think, yeah, I do remember saying something about that, because in the old days I just think, oh, this is great, I'll just put it out to CSV and then I'll go and find a machine with Excel on it. I want to get the CSV over there, and yeah, it's a bit of a pain. Yeah. Yeah. I tend to use lowest common denominator because a lot of this stuff I'm using on customer systems, where if I need to get something like that, I've then got to figure out how I get to the internet. Do I need a proxy? Is it our downloads barred? And it gets to be a pain in the posterior. So we can use get win event very easily to look at things. So in best Blue Peter fashion, which will probably lose most of you younger / non-British people, here's one I prepared earlier. Which is that one, I think. Yeah, so what I've done here is really just done a get win event with a filter. Let me just zoom in on that with good old sysinternal zoom it. Great tool. So I basically told it, just go and show me all the events across every single event log that's got any events in it between those two particular times. And for those of you who were really paying attention, you'll notice that was the time about that I logged on. So now I've got a large number of events in there, which may or may not be relevant to my inquiries. Well, what are my inquiries? At the moment, I haven't really got any. This is just an example. If that was a slow logon, or it was a logon that produced an error or something like that, then I could go in, query my event logs. But once I've got a grid view, I can then start filtering. I can either do a very simple filter by typing up here. So any of the columns that's got Guy in it, put it in there. Or I can add criteria, so I can start filtering the particular columns. I can remove columns if I'm not interested in them. Another nice feature of Outgrid View is if you give it a minus pass-through, you'll get an OK cancel down the bottom, and everything that you select will then be returned. So if nothing else, you can get it into Notepad and things like that, rather than having to, right, let me make a note of that or a screenshot, because it's just easier then to check on it. So I make huge use of that in my troubleshooting, because there is a rich set of stuff. It's not just a Microsoft exam question, where do you go to look for problems? There is a lot of stuff in the event logs, particularly a lot more now than the old days when there was really only the application system event log and security for that matter to look at stuff. But something else, particularly if you're looking at either logons or just general usage of processes, either from a utilization perspective or from a security perspective, what's running on my systems? What are my users running on these endpoints? Or what's running on these servers? Can I optimize it in any way? This web server is running slowly. What the hell is actually running on there? Well, if you enable process creation and termination auditing, and optionally command line auditing as well, then you'll get on any particular endpoint, you'll get a process creation event every time the process starts, with information about who started it, as what user, and then you'll get, if that process is exited, you'll get a process termination event as well. And guess what? We get one event and a little bit of scripting to be able to marry up the process terminates with the process creates. We can then say, well, how long did that process run for? So certainly for logons, that's proved very interesting for me and very useful to find that sort of information. So if I go back to, again, I can do a lot of, this one I can't do in one line, unfortunately, because this requires getting all the process stops, putting them into, well, I use a hash table because you get quite a lot, so for faster lookups, but it takes quite a while to build the hash table. So I can say if process X, process 1, 2, 3, 4 starts, have I got a stop event for it so I can show the duration. The script itself, you can say, well, I'm not actually interested in termination times and durations because I just want to see what the hell's run. I want to see if this user is running any dodgy software, for instance. So the information we can get back, again, this is purely by looking at each event that we get back from get-win event, because if you look at an event log, I'm not actually running an event viewer. That's poor demo planning, isn't it? And what you'll find is you get a lot of text. We say, well, I don't really want to start parsing text because that can be a bit of a pain. Of course, you can use regular expressions. Oh, regular expressions are lovely, aren't they? Yeah. So if this eventually does come back, So let's go and pick a 4688, which we all know is a process start. So you can say, okay, well, here's all my information with some nice useful fields. So I can even see when people are running things elevated. Process IDs, and of course we can all do the hex to decimal conversion in our heads, can't we? So there's a lot of information, but do I really want to start parsing that text? Well, you don't need to. That's the beauty of looking at this events. We can actually when we use get when event, we'll have all this stuff available as an array of properties. So we can just go and look at basically, that would be property 0, property 1, property 2, etc. So it's much easier to get. I don't have to parse text. There's nothing else. Regex is typically quite slow depending on what it exactly is you're trying to match against. So it's very easy to get that stuff. And then we just bang it into a grid view, or in fact, here's one that's got, you can see down the bottom, yeah, you probably can't see down in the bottom corner. I've got OK and cancel, so I can select a number of things that perhaps I'm interested in, then paste them into Notepad afterwards, so that I've actually got the detail of them. So if we look at something like, let's go and look for Explorer.
So just also part of the way I've been using the grid view before as well is you can then treat the return object when you click OK and turn around and do the opposite and search on, say, a PID for that object. To turn around and develop it so you've actually got an interactive investigation console.
Yeah, I use grid views as if you like, a poor man's. Well, so you don't have to, but selection mechanism, if you like, so that you don't have to then go and write WPF or Windows Forms or anything like that. So it's not particularly pretty, but it saves people having to do it either in a command prompt or whatever else. Command prompt? No, PowerShell prompt. So you can see we've got information here about, there's good old Explorer, run by me. There's nothing interesting on the command line here. This is another good reason why we shouldn't be using anything that passes clear text credentials on command lines, because if they were, I'd be able to see them in here and this is just standard system auditing, although it does go to the security event log, and by default, only members of the local admins can look at the security event log. Who the parent process was, parent appeared, whether it was elevated, when it started. That hasn't ended in my time period, but you can see here we've got some which haven't terminated, and again just add a calculated column, very easy in your own custom objects, which is how long it took to run. And there's also a summary option available here, but I'm not really trying to publicize scripts, given I don't make any money from you guys downloading them. It's more the sorts of things that you can do, and you can take those scripts and adapt them to your needs. But there is a wealth of information in the event logs. But just because something isn't the event log doesn't mean the information isn't somewhere else, perhaps in a text log or an ETL log. Again, there are ways of, I've got various scripts out there which will go and parse particular vendors' logs. I'm working one with FS Logic, somebody knows them, at the moment, again, trying to troubleshoot and automate remediation of problems with them. I do a lot with Avanti, so I've got the text log. I use regular expressions to break it up, or parsing of ETL traces. I've got one for network monitoring, so you actually don't need to use a network monitor. And of course, we can remote these to lots of different servers if we need to, without actually to MSTSC or similar onto them. Which brings us nicely on to remoting. So there have been various, I think it was session, was it first thing this morning, about remoting? Did anybody go to that? I didn't, because there were two sessions I wanted to go to. So I'm not really going to repeat, hopefully, what was said in there, other than sort of in the context of what I use for my troubleshooting, which is, as you'll find out, a lot of commands will take minus computer name.
You need to be aware that in PowerShell 6 and 7, they're ripping that individual commandlet remoting out.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I think I'll be staying on 5 for quite a while anyway. I'll wait for 5.2. I will. There won't be a 5.2, somebody will say, won't they? A bit like they said there wouldn't be a 7. Oh, no, it's interesting to know, thank you.
Is that where you're going to have to switch over to invoke against the PS session?
Yeah, either run it in invoke, either wrap it up in invoke command, either just directly or over a session.
Yeah, we'll actually come on to sessions in a moment. So if I do something like get Kim instance, another thing not a lot of people know about, If I control space in there, I have to put a minus in. I get a list of everything, so I don't necessarily have to put minus and then tab to tab through everything. I can actually see a list of all the arguments it can take. The ones on the right are the standard ones that get through the sort of commandlet binding, advanced parameter things. And I can even just cursor through these if I want to, and it even shows me the type down the bottom. Yeah, come on. Control space. It's only in newer PowerShells. I'm not sure if it's version specific or OS specific, but if I try it on older OSs, it doesn't always work.
It's actually PS3 player that is doing that. I'm not sure if it has a minimum PowerShell version but this functionality comes from a watch for PS3 player. It's PS gallery. It's older versions, but it's not out of box. You can't install it.
Well, that's built in. I've not got any extra modules in here. Sorry. Right, that'll be why. Yeah, basically on 10 I get it, but if I go to, got lots of customers still on 2008 R2 and Win 7. Would you believe? As I'm sure you all probably have somewhere hidden in your organisations. So this can be useful, but it sounds like it's going to go away in 7. But there are lots of other ways to do it. Yeah, so we're not taking away remoting, just the ways that it can be done. And again, if you're in Richard's session this morning, you see a lot of the use of invoke command. If I want to enable remoting, it's not already enabled, then as long as I'm an admin, then I can do this. Again, the remoting is secure, it's encrypted. I can only do it as a user who'd be given access. So I said about session. So we can start a session on a remote machine. This is very similar to, have you ever telnetted onto a Unix or Linux box or a router or something like that? So this is where I tend to use enter PS session interactively rather than in scripts, so that I can get onto a machine to do stuff, particularly if I can't MSTSC to it, because either it hangs, the logon hangs, or there's just, it's out of resource, or CPU is maxed. And hopefully, as long as remoting permission-wise has been set up, I can do an enter PS session and get onto it that way. So if I go to that one. So at the moment I'm on this local VM called GL Controller 01. But what I can do, again, I'm going to use Control R now. So I hit Control R and I know it's enter something. So that takes me back to enter PS session, which may not have even been in this boot of the particular PowerShell session that I'm in, because that's persistent. Then I'm going to enter interactively a session into my domain controller, another VM that I'm running locally on here. So computer name on here. Again, env is actually a PS provider, so to get environment variables, so we don't have any of that percent computer name percent equivalent. So I'm now on my domain controller if I needed to. So what process is running? This happens everywhere. When you see red, don't run away screaming, yeah? Read the error. And what the error is here, bugger if I can get to the bottom of this, is that I get a time difference.
It's just updated. It's 7:11. Literally,
I think this is because I resume my VMs too close to when I'm trying to demo, and of course we all know with more than 2 minutes skew with Kerberos.
Yeah,
whoa!
It was 1644.
Taunt, yeah.
You got NTP by multiple.
Probably your machine is getting the time from
Yeah, your DC's probably.
Yeah.
711's what's on your.
Oh, should we troubleshoot that instead?
711's on your machine and 1644.
Yeah. Bizarre. Right.
It could be a feature of the latest Windows 10, to be honest with you.
Oh, these are Server 2016 VMs. One's Server Core, and this is just bog standard Server 2016. So we can't blame Windows 10 for this one, unfortunately. But yeah, I hadn't noticed that bit down the bottom before. I managed to successfully demo this last week. But yeah, so that's the downside with Enter PS Session. If your clocks are askew, yeah, you're buggered because it buggers up the Kerberos authentication.
It must have been right when you entered it. It might not have worked.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's see if I can do a... Let's wait, yeah. Yeah, there you go. So if I just keep an eye on... But sometimes if that's the only way you can get on, you're going to have to live with it to be able to troubleshoot, aren't you? Yeah.
You wouldn't know that was the issue because you wouldn't be able to get on.
Absolutely, yeah. But as I failed to do last week when I was doing a demo, and there was some red, it's like, oh, we'll ignore that. And it's like, I look at it, oh, right, yeah, actually read the error. Because that's what a lot of people, I don't know about consumers if you guys write scripts, but I find that if I give it to support people, and otherwise, as soon as they see red, it's like, oh, that's it, I'm out of here, I can't do anything. Read the error. So I would say as a script developer, try and give very meaningful errors as much as you can if you have to give the error, if you can't work around it. So I use enter PS session when my clocks are in sync. A lot of the time for sysinternals process monitor. So if you are looking at a Windows 10 desktop, for instance, you want to troubleshoot a logon or something like that. It's not like a server OS where you can get one session as an admin, set up your monitoring tools, and then get the user to log on, reproduce the issue whilst you're still on Windows 10. Well, unless we're talking about WVD multi-user in Azure, but we're not. Then it's one user at a time. And I probably don't want to disturb the system by logging on as an admin to run some tools to disconnect to log the user on, because it might be only the first log on after boot where the problem is. So what I can do with Process Monitor, if you use Process Monitor, people use, yeah, great tool. Life before that was very painful, or Life before Farmon and Regmon, as they were separately back then, it's very painful. But they can actually be run headless, so lights out, without a GUI, because that's the one downside of Enter PS Session, is I can't run anything that's got a GUI. But what you can do with PropMon is basically tell it, start as soon as it launches, write to a particular file, either give it a duration argument of how long to run for, or you just leave it running with Enter PS Session. Your normal user can log on to their lovely Windows 10 desktop and reproduce the issue, whilst your Enter PS Session is still there and still interactive, and then you can run PropMon with a /terminate option, and that terminates the trace cleanly, such that it can then, the PML file can be pulled into a PropMon somewhere and you can pour over it to your heart's content. It's rarely a day goes past where I don't pour over a PropMon trace, unfortunately. So that's where I would use Enter a PS Session for an interactive debugging session, similar, like I say, to Telnet, if your clocks are in sync and Kerberos is okay. Or you could use good old PS Exec. Although, having been used for various malware attacks in the last couple of years, quite a lot of AV software is blocking it these days. But again, a different remoting method. And then we'll be getting SSH as well, and there'll be fun there. So some examples of sorts of things I do. A testnet connection, better than a ping, because I'm actually say, can I actually get a connection to that port? So it's not only is it, there I'm using an IP address, but I'll probably use a name if that's what my users would use, because that checks domain resolution, routing, as well as actually is there something there listening on the port. Expiring certificates I mentioned before, because we've got the certificate PowerShell provider. Then I can just do it again, because this is on one line, I've used a question mark instead of where object. Current date, 300 is a bit of a silly, I must change that to something like 30, what expires in the next 30 days, and then show me subject certificate, which probably tells me what certificate it is and what its expiry date is.
Sorry, there's a verbose option on the testnet connection, which also can give you the ping time to it. So
Right.
There's two servers in the same network.
That's useful to know, thank you. Yeah, I do tend to run mine as verbose on a lot of thought, and sometimes mine as debug as well, just to see if any extra stuff comes out. But then you find some vendors will kind of leave that stuff enabled, even when you haven't got those flags set. So a couple of examples of commands where I use, effectively I'd use Task Manager, but if I haven't got a GUI, I can't. So if I'm remoting into machines, what's the overall process time? What's the actual good old TI worker? You're familiar with TI worker? Which goes and updates stuff during Windows updates, which I think is partly the cause for a lot of global warming. The amount of CPU usage it uses. So we can go and check that. Notice on that one as well, I've actually prefixed it with a get-date. I would tend to do that more on something like testnet connection. Why do I do that? Because if I'm talking to the firewall guy, and he says, well, when did you do that testnet connection? You go, oh, about 10 minutes ago. If you prefix any command that you do with a get-date, it doesn't really matter what I'm going to do. That's doesn't really matter what. But you see, I'll get the date out first. So the semicolon is just a delimiter. So I can So if that was my testnet connection, I haven't got a network connection, so I'm not going to do that. Then I can say, yeah, actually, yeah, it was. I did it at 17, 17 and 31 seconds. Is that enough detail for you? You could actually get to the milliseconds as well if you really needed to. But again, you don't know if there's then a pause between the get date and actually the get process. But it's that order of magnitude. And actually, if you notice here, what I've got is I've actually modified my prompt in my PowerShell session itself to have the date and time in it, which can be useful. But the thing to remember there is before you enter anything that you want to time, hit enter. Because if I sit here talking for 5 minutes and then I do a ping, whatever, and it's not 1717, yeah, it was actually 1718. So I would just tend to hit enter, then do my command. But it's useful, particularly if you don't always remember to put a get-date in to sort of date stamp what time you tried something to cross-reference to logs or event logs or text logs. Again, this example here, again, the last one shows you just any perfmon counter of interest, you can get one line of PowerShell. So if certain things you want to set up your own alerts or stuff, you haven't got alerting software in there. Whether it be a .NET counter or a SQL counter, a network counter, memory, anything, you can set your own alerts up very quickly. And as I said before, emailing is built in. This particular key and subkeys was the cause of a 45-minute logon. I kid you not, 45 minutes at a Citrix customer health check a couple of years ago, because they were persistent servers and they hadn't been cleaned up for. I will make these slides available afterwards as well, by the way, for years. And so every time a user had logged on, it kept some keys for that user in there. So the poor old group policy client, you can see this Protmon, was spending all its time looking at these sort of the cache and running through it, and occasionally a log on would come in and go, just hold on a moment, or 45 minutes while I do some other stuff. Crazy. And of course, one line of PowerShell, I can get rid of all surgically target particular keys. Because in regedit, I think I tweeted this last week, so you'd see it down the left-hand side, there'd be pages and pages of SID keys. But because on the left-hand side in regedit, you can't shift select them. But guess what? With the PowerShell provider for the registry, I can do a remove item, or alias of RI, or del, or arrays, that registry key /s-1-*, and it will remove all of those keys. Just make sure you're removing the right things, yeah? I've never removed the wrong thing, honestly. I've used Citrix examples there. I tend to probably use something like an AV process or something like that. So McAfee, what processes am I running that are from McAfee? So I might do that in Process Explorer or Task Manager, whereas if I do that again in PowerShell, I can just do a PS. If I can remember what my keyboard is. Minus math, that well-known. Show me everything that's running out of because path is the, in fact, we'll show you. Again, pipe through select, name, comma, ID, comma, path. It just shows you the full path to the executable, so I can see exactly what processes are coming from that particular installation folder. And you see here, I've actually got a mixture of stuff running out of my user profile and stuff running out of program files x86. I can even then go on and find versions. So if I do that, Control Z, undo. Yeah, do you know about that on the command line? And Control backspace to delete words at a time. Again, you delete too much, and you can Control Z, which is quite handy. And I think that's only Windows 10 as well, unless somebody wants to contradict me otherwise. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in that one, isn't there? And then I can get from there. Notice what I've then got from the process. I've actually got to the executable, and then if I want to say, well, what versions are they? Because again, part of my troubleshooting. Citrix client works there, doesn't work there. Are they the same version? Is everything the same version? So I can pipe the get item property, where I've lazily used an alias, into select, well, it's version info, but again, I don't necessarily need to know what it's called. And I'll put an expand in there, because version info is a structure. So I can see the file version of every one of those executables that's running and make sure they're sort of consistent with each other. Because look at that, I've got a 19.8 there and a 19.9. Is that right? Well, let me go and compare it with a system where it is working. Oh, look, on the system it's working. It is 19.09. Oh, okay. Well, let me get those two consistent and see if the problem goes away. So one last example I wanted to show you, probably more because you're fed up with me talking about Citrix and end-user compute stuff, although, as I said before, the mechanisms are the same, is one for IIS logs. People have to look at IIS logs much? Yeah, lovely, aren't they? So here's, again, one I prepared earlier. Tweet, but again, this is a one-liner which is in the slide deck and the sort of thing I tweet on a regular basis. Again, the main reason I tweet is not to help you guys, because I'm selfish, is so that in 2 months' time, when I think, oh, I've got a command for that, I'll go to my Twitter, search, in this case, IIS from Guy R. Leech. It'll give me that on customer site, copy and paste, and I'm there. So this is taking an IIS log and put it into one of our lovely grid views. Well, what use is that? Well, I can then start filtering, if it's a particular endpoint, particular IP address, I can filter where the status is perhaps at 500. 500 is the one we probably worry about as web developers, because that's an error from our back end. The duration. So, for me, when I'm using IIS for various bits of software that I implement, then I'm worried about performance. So what I can do is look at the duration column. I've just clicked on that to sort it. Can't remember if I sorted it up or down. There we go. And down at the bottom here, I can see these are sort of, because they're milliseconds, 17 seconds, 13 seconds, 12 seconds. These are slow responses. Yeah. So I can then start to see on the left, are they at similar sorts of times? Is it overloaded? But how many requests am I getting per second? Well, the next stage is to take this log and then further analyze it, which I've again got a script for on GitHub. So we can say, well, how many requests per second am I getting? What's the fastest? What's the slowest? So just taking all this information, as I was saying before, it's not just getting stuff from event logs, any sort of logs, depending on what they are, and just bringing that information in, but automatically, so that you can very quickly visualize it rather than to plow through text files. And almost out of time, I always do. Oh, I'm stuck, can't do a page down. Yeah. We've already seen this one. When did that particular process start? Search for content. Again, easy enough. SLS being an alias for select string. The versions, again, I showed you doing it live with processes, but I can do the same for files, static files. So dir, program files, Microsoft Office, Office 14, and do it from there. Again, I could put it out to a CSV if I wanted to. Poor man's inventory software. This we've already seen anyway. I think a bit of repetition there actually. Sorry, it's just getting late in the day. It's been a long day. You know what it's like waiting around all day to deliver a session. So that's what I was saying before with the Citrix, except this is the service side. Actually, no, it's not repetition, it's service. So that's showing me all the McAfee services, for instance. So it's not repetition. It's been a long day anyway. That's actually a link to the one that takes that IIS log analysis one stage further. So I think... Oh, I can't do page down again. Any PowerPoint experts? Yeah, I'll swap PowerShell knowledge for PowerPoint. I am clicking next. One-liners, yeah, exactly. Well, that's why I put them right at the start. I'm trying to be a comedian as well, but it usually falls on deaf ears. I personally don't like one-liners, particularly in scripts, because they just make it very hard to understand. Sometimes they can be very efficient, but they can also be very difficult to understand. So that's the one that I actually used to produce the IIS log. It does a bit of in-place property creation to take the time taken from a text field and put it into an int. if I'm on site, I could probably work that out in 5 or 10 minutes again from first principles, but why bother? Just have a repository of these and call it Twitter and search for it. That's one I use for showing me all the events across every event log that's got at least one record in it between those two particular times. Obviously quite easy to adapt that query, I hope, to different times. If you can't, okay. Today's not probably been that useful for you then. So some of them are useful, but not necessarily in the script itself. Oh, yeah, I was looking at this and thinking, what does this do? This is what I wrote last week. I'd got 2 IIS servers. This IIS server works fine, this one doesn't. Is it a permissions issue? So I wrote something, first of all, to show the permissions. I thought, okay, well, let me just write something to apply permissions from this folder structure to that folder structure. And that's what this does. Either with remote machines, or it could just be 2 different paths on the same machine. Obviously running as an admin. So useful things to carry around with you, but again, just be aware that if you're just taking this straight off the internet and you're probably going to run it elevated, are we sure we know what it's going to do? If nothing else, take a snapshot of the machine you're on. If it's doing AD stuff, let's take a backup of that AD. And that one's I've actually borrowed. That's not for troubleshooting at all. That's from our friend IIS Reset Me. I'll leave that in slides for you to have a play with, because even I don't quite understand how that works yet, and I've spent a little while looking at it. But that's all that's bad, if you like. It's very clever, but that's also all that's bad about one-liners. What the hell does that do? Would I run that on my machine? Well, yeah, I could probably run that on my machine because it doesn't look. I don't think there's any way that could be malicious. But yeah, that's not quite the auto. I've seen some one-liners which are even worse than that in terms of trying to understand it. One minute to go. All right, so only 4 more slides. Where's about this slide deck? Let's just go through. I've done the get date anyway. What PowerShell version am I running? Because as we said, some features we've looked at are only available on newer versions. $PS version table, built-in variable. I quite often have to write scripts that still work with version 2 because I get shouted at by salespeople if the customer's been forced to upgrade to at least 3, so that can be quite painful. The control R, so that is just so useful, but remember that it's persistent, so if you need to cover your tracks, you need to get rid of your history file. Tab complete everything. Yeah, everything. When I come back to old-fashioned executables now, I get annoyed that I can't tab complete the command line options to executables, because I'm just so used to doing it in PowerShell. And various other commands are very useful. Measure objects, count stuff. Don't count stuff manually. Yeah. How many files have I got in this particular folder? Again, I'll just use the alias for it. Oh, 55. Yeah. Notice though, I've got the ability to do averages, sums, etc. as well. You just need to select a property that you're acting on for those. Measure command. How fast did that run? I made a tweak. Did the command run any faster? Just wrap it round measure command. It'll tell you exactly. There's none of this stopwatch business. Yeah, it'll tell you exactly how long it took to run. And outgrid view. If there was a favourite commandlet, that would be mine, because it's just for visualising the data I need for troubleshooting. It's just great, and we can make sort of poor man's GUIs with it as well. Okay, well, hopefully useful. If there's any question, I will be hanging around. Well, in fact, I'm not hanging around because I've been told I need to lead a posse to the pub afterwards, but I will be in the pub afterwards. So you're going to ask me there because I think we need to go back into the main room for the wrap-up and draw. But thank you very much.
Also, please go to the main room, so the final portion. Of you who got lucky, who got lucky,
So
who
yeah,
got
one
surprised.
goes through any threads that have been marked as suspended.
I've got one of those controller, which is coming out, but it also